The syllabus real quickly so we can go ahead and get all that good stuff out of the way. Basically, we are looking at the letters of 1st and 2nd Corinthians. We're going to understand the cultural landscape, the things that make the church at Corinth tick and what makes it fall apart. What do you think about when you think about the church at Corinth or the letters of Corinthians? What do you think about?
Paul.
Okay, we think about Paul. Very good. What else do you think about when you think about Corinthians?
Spiritual gifts.
Spiritual gifts.
And using them orderly.
Using them orderly, okay. What else? What else? When you think about Corinthians, how many of you have read Corinthians? Hopefully you've read Corinthians at some point in time in your lives, right? Chaos isn't the first thing that comes to anybody's mind when you read Corinthians, especially 1 Corinthians. Chaos, disorder, aggravation, the church that you don't want to pastor. I don't know. Maybe it's just that for me. I don't know. But that's the thing that comes to my mind when I read Corinthians. And we're going to study about how and why it was that way. So a couple of things of the objectives, identifying Paul's connections and communications with those in the Corinthian church before and after writing the letter. We're told of some of his the people that he communicated with, how and why the church of Corinth had sunk to such a deplorable condition. And I am using that in the correct context at this point in time. Condition reflected in 1 Corinthians. Identify the specific problems in the church at Corinth and Paul's remedy. Identify the three main topics in 2 Corinthians, and then, of course, theological terms and cultural background and all that kind of stuff. The only thing we're using for a textbook, and hopefully there was nowhere else that said this, right? But we're just using the Corinthians, okay? I've looked, I haven't found one yet that I like, so I may just have to write one. I don't know, but yeah, I haven't found anything that I like just yet. Found a lot of stuff that could help in resources, but nothing really that just kind of lays out what I have in mind. So we're just going to kind of wing it, all right, with first and 2 Corinthians. So one of the things that we're going to examine in here is this idea that's on the board already, and that is correcting a distracted church. Paul writes this letter from a standpoint of correction. And that is an important thing. You talked about spiritual gifts and how to use them orderly. And a lot of times spiritual gifts, this is the go-to passage when we talk about spiritual gifts. But he is writing it from a standpoint of correction. Right? And so we need to understand that what he is saying here is that maybe, yes, he is obviously affirming that there are spiritual gifts, but he's also, as you said, correcting them, teaching us how to use those in a correct order of worship, how to worship, that kind of thing. So that, in fact, is one of the assignments that we're going to do in this class. I'm sorry, Anna, but it's one of the assignments that we're doing is that you're going to write a paper on church discipline. A paper on church discipline. You have several categories. That's your major overall theme is church discipline. Because I believe that's where Paul is coming from in this letter. But I'll give you the topics, and then you will write from the standpoint of understanding the passage in Corinthians and implement the necessary church discipline that is there. So let me give you some of the guidelines for this paper so that we're all clear on that. Number one, whatever topic you go with, there is a Corinthians passage that goes with it, okay? So you need to make sure that you understand the Corinthian passage that you're dealing with. Make sure that you give a clear understanding of that and how you would apply that text. And then you're going to describe either a hypothetical situation with a hypothetical solution, or if you know and you've experienced, we have some, pastors' kids or pastors' associates and kids and things like that. So maybe you have some real life scenarios that will obviously relate to the topics that I'm going to give, and you want to share those. Well, if you do, please change the names of the people so that those who are innocent or guilty will not be incriminated, okay? So yeah, do that, please. If you're going to use an actual life, please just change the names, all right? And please definitely don't use your name. If you were the one involved in the scandal, please don't use your name, okay? All right, so, of course, all the other stuff is just mechanics. We have adopted the Cape-Turabian. That means when you do your research on the text and you're using commentaries or you're using any kind of research, maybe you want to go and research an actual situation that pertains to a Corinthians text. Of course, you know you need to footnote that. That's what Cape-Turabian means, is basically footnotes and a works cited page. All right, so just do that. Double-spaced, minimum of 6 resources. 5 need to be from this library since you're here. I may fudge on that a little bit. Again, if you want to research from the internet, maybe an actual church problem, a church case or whatever that relates to a Corinthians passage. And of course, this is only going to be from 6 to 8 pages. All right, from 6 to 8 pages. So it's not a large, massive paper. It's a medium. This is what we call a medium paper, from 6 to 8 pages. Now, I have for you on the board and on your syllabus some topics, and I have on the board the explanation of those topics. Some of them are kind of obvious. Some of them are kind of silly, but just to think along those lines. So, first of all is the struggle for power. Because I have a distaste for deacons, therefore I have placed it this way, all right? Deacons have split your church. Heaven help us. Your church is divided into 4 major cliques. Your task as the pastor, who is not involved in this whole aggravation, is to bring unity to the church. And of course, you're going to use 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and chapter 3. You could argue to chapter 1 and through 3. How would you bring unity and harmony back into the church? By the way, these are first come, first serve. So if you want that, I would wait until at least I give all of them, and then decide what you want. But I don't want a repeat of. I don't want 4 papers on spiritual gifts. That's what I'm saying. All right. So that's the first one, the struggle for power. Of course, the very first 4 chapters of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, deals with the division in the church. And you'll start to recognize some of the things that are going on there. Secondly is the sex scandal in the church. And if you're going to write about Jimmy Swaggart, just leave his name out of it, okay? No, I'm just kidding. Don't write about Jimmy Swaggart, all right? All right, so a major sex scandal has been revealed. You, the pastor, who is not involved in the scandal, you got to use 1 Corinthians 5. How would you deal with that scandal and exercise church discipline? So using the text, how would you deal with a scandal? What did Paul do? What can you do in a lovingly, legal kind of way to deal with a scandal? What would you recommend? That kind of thing. All right, so that's sex scandal. Suing sisters. It doesn't have to be sisters. It could be any 2 people in your church. 2 church members who are suing each other. How would you use 1 Corinthians chapter 6? How can you as the pastor resolve the situation before it goes to court and places a stain, a stigma on the church, okay? And like I said, I was just alliterating there. It doesn't have to be sisters. It could be any 2 members you want to. All right? And be creative with the sex scandal. I mean, you can. There's all kinds of crazy stuff with suing people. There's all kinds of crazy stuff out there. This one came to me while I was eating dinner at P.F. Chang's on Sunday. I was looking down at the menu. Seriously, I was looking down at the menu. Everybody knows where P.F. Chang's is, right? You know where P.F. Chang's is? P.F. Chang's. It's a Chinese restaurant, fancy Chinese restaurant down in Greenville, off of Woodruff Road, near where I live. So. And I looked at this, and that was the first thing that came to my mind is, I wonder if I eat this, is this food sacrificed to idols? It's kind of a silly one, but at the same time, you are the pastor eating with a group of church members at P.F. Chang's, like I was. And one of the members orders the Buddha's feast. I don't even remember what was involved in that meal. All I know is I do not like P.F. Chang's, okay? I can't stand them. Okay, just give me some good old American Chinese food. All right, just find the most rundown looking building that says Dragon something on it, and give me some good plain American Chinese food. All right, I guarantee you their sweet and sour chicken will be better than what I had at P.F. Chang's. All right. Regardless, I saw Buddha's feast there, and I can't remember what it is. Another member argues: are they eating meat or food sacrificed to idols? Obviously with the word Buddha involved there. So, first of all, you need to read 1 Corinthians 8. You need to understand what it is. And then you need to help them like you're talking to them. Explain what this means and why they are or are not eating meat sacrificed to idols. And if you think that they are, then what should they do about it? Or what should they at least consider or think about it from, again, the text. That one was just divinely inspired from Sunday's meal, all right? So anyway, what a birthday party to go to. It's one of those things. I was invited. Anyway, gluttony at the Lord's table. This one, unless you actually read the text and actually understand the text, you may not get this one at first, but this is actually what happened, all right? But just follow along with me if you want to do it. It's your time to serve communion it's the time to serve communion at your church. You decide to have a meal and then share communion, which is what they did in antiquity, okay? This is what they did during the time of Paul, is that they would have a meal and share communion. The problem is that some of the more wealthy, privileged members of your church have eaten all of your bread and drank all of your juice. Or wine, if you want wine, whatever, I've drank all your juice used for communion. So in 1 Corinthians 11, again, how would you deal with these people? How does Paul deal with them? How would you, deal with these people? Okay? And it is a matter, it's kind of funny, a lot of people don't understand this text, but it is a matter of gluttony. It's a matter of the rich getting there before the poor do. And they eat up all the stuff. Anyway, you go and you research it if that's the one you want. All right, distracting tongue talkers, my favorite subject. Distracting tongue talkers. You've experienced this problem for the past 3 worship services. You have a couple of members who insist to claim they have been moved by the Spirit to speak in tongues and they're not insisting that they cause distractions, but they are causing distractions. By the way, this comes from a real life experience. One of mine. You, the pastor, haven't been able to preach, because isn't that what we always walk away with, talking about, well, boy, God, it was so good that the pastor used to preach. However, the problem is no one else is getting anything out of the services either. Okay, so how do you use your understanding? And I want you to, and we'll talk about it, but how do you use your understanding of the whole block of chapter 12, 13, 14, because they all go together. I know we want to separate 13 out of the bunch, but it really goes together. So how would you use your understanding of these chapters to deal with this issue of people that are just hyper-spiritual and distracting the church service, okay? That is one that you are able to. And then the last one, I think, is the walking not dead. And again, this is not, I doubt very seriously this would happen, but then again, I have heard some crazy things in church before. A prominent Sunday school teacher in your church has influenced many of your members into believing that there is no bodily resurrection. They believe we turn into angels, they believe we turn into some kind of spirits, whatever. Using your understanding of 1 Corinthians 15, how do you correct this false teaching before it becomes a major problem in the church? Now I will take bids on all these topics. Who wants what? No one wants it. You need to hear one again. You're stuck on 3. Oh, the PF.
Like 3 different ones.
Oh, you stuck on 3 different ones. Okay.
What are the 3 different ones you're stuck on?
A struggle for power.
Okay.
Distracting tongue talkers.
Okay.
And the walking not dead.
And the
You want me to
walking.
take one from me? Since you said you pick first.
Yeah.
First come, first serve. So it doesn't matter. Whoever wants to.
I'll go with the struggle for power.
The struggle for power
No, I'm messing.
is Anna.
laughing tongue talker and the walking not dead.
Go ahead, Hannah. Ladies first.
Are you sure?
Yeah. I'm just,
I'm going to take distracting thoughts. I've had that experience.
Hannah. All right.
What was? Can you say? Or can you pull the slide back up of gluttony of the Lord?
That was basically the problem is the more wealthy and privileged have come in and they have eaten all the bread and drank all the juice that you were going to use for communion. By the way, this is the actual account from Paul. Okay, it was kind of awkward. If you could think of a way to maybe reconstruct this whole issue of the Lord's table, I'd be willing to listen to it. But this is the actual event of what actually happened. Is that the more wealthy and privileged came in, ate all the food, and did not leave room for the poor to actually take communion.
So you kind of just tell it from Paul's account.
You can. I would rather you create a scenario. You know, yeah.
Go ahead.
I would choose the swing
Sisters
sisters.
suing each other. Okay, the lawsuit. Okay. That's it. That leaves you. What two are you stuck to?
I mean, the two other ones that I really kind of understood was like the sex scandal one and then gluttony at the Lord's table. So I'll just do gluttony at the Lord's table.
All right, Caleb. Gluttony at the Lord's table. No one wanted P.F. Chang's Buddha's Feast, huh? Well. Okay, so we've got Anna doing a struggle for power, the division in the church, Akintolo doing suing sisters, Kayla doing gluttony at the Lord's table, and Hannah doing distracting tongue talkers. All right. That way, if anybody else shows up, then they have the rest of the things to pick. Okay. Let's move on to the commentary. You do need to do a commentary for this class. This is 1st and 2nd Corinthians, so you'll do a commentary. Basically, that means that you'll take 5 verses, you'll break it down. How many of you have done the commentary? I know you guys have. You guys haven't, right? Well, this is a devotional commentary, and I'll bring something Wednesday to show you a little bit more of how to do that. But you basically break it down paragraph by paragraph. And you comment on it. This is not something you go and research. You don't do, you don't look up anything. You basically just read Corinthians and you comment paragraph by paragraph. Basically, what the Lord is saying to you, what the text is saying to you, kind of thing. So it's more like a devotional commentary.
Is it kind of like what we did for, I don't know if you remember, but Daniel in Revelation Online? Where we had to
something like that. That was more chapter by chapter. This is more paragraph by paragraph. But yes, something like that, where you kind of give an understanding of the text, your understanding of the text. So, by the way, the paper is due. Please pay attention to that. It's due March the 3rd. This is after spring break, so you do have some time after, during spring break to work on a paper if you need to. Please don't come up to me before spring break and go, "What is my topic again?" I will not be inviting you to P.F. Chang's to eat Buddha's Feast, all right? All right, and then the commentary is due at the end of the semester, April 21st. This will be the date before the exam week, all right? You have 4 tests. Basically, they'll roll around at the beginning of each month. I haven't set a schedule for that just yet, but that's basically the way I do it. You guys know that. It's usually you've got 4 tests that like I said, they roll around the beginning of each month, and then the last test is during exam week, whenever that is. So, any other questions or comments on the syllabus?
Oh, I do.
Yes.
For the commentary, the
Yes.
translation that we use,
It doesn't matter.
but
A translation, preferably.
yeah.
Like King James, like New King James, like ESV. If you have anything else, I'd be willing to open to it.
Because this one, I don't know.
I'm gonna throw you out the window in a minute.
throw me
He suggested that in the Gospel of John with his work he's going to do in the Gospel of John.
So you probably would be better not to use the voice either. That's enough. I guess that's enough.
It's probably a no. I personally haven't looked at the Voice translation, but I've heard some bad things about it. I probably need to go look at the Voice. Are they calling it a translation, or are they calling it a paraphrase? Or are they calling it anything these days? Who knows what they're doing these days? The Voice, okay.
Have you still turned the message into a translation?
Well, I just wanted to know your opinion about the Voice.
I'd have to go back and look. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look and just kind of read some key passages that I tend to read when I'm comparing translations and things like that. So, but I've heard of it, but I haven't really looked at it a whole lot. I've really enjoyed going through the ESV. I mean, I love the ESV, and I really have enjoyed going from that, and that's probably as far as I'll migrate from. I used to be King James only. I migrated to New King James, and then I migrated to ESV. That's as far as where, because ESV kind of keeps it at that same literal equivalent, close to the language, the original. Like King James and New King James does. New American Standard from time to time does the same thing. I used to like the New Living Translation, but that's the other end of the spectrum. That's nuance. That it's still a translation, but it's nuance. It's almost explaining what I'm getting at P.F. Chang's for me. It's almost explaining the ingredients of the cake, and sometimes they get it wrong. I mean, it's what it is. But sometimes they get it wrong. So
a more traditional version.
Yeah, probably more closer to the original version is what I'm looking for.
That's good.
Yeah.
So what's the best? What is the best version right now in your opinion?
The original.
King James.
No, the original. Like the original Hebrew and the original Greek. Like I said, King James does a fine job. New King James cleans up the King James. ESV, to me, like I said, that's kind of the one I'm stuck on right now, is ESV. I would think that does, a fairly good job at translating most things. Most of it, a lot of it. Does that help? Does that hurt? Is that okay?
No, that helps.
Okay. All right. Let's look through some stuff. Since we're here and we're talking and we're not going anywhere, let's go ahead and get into it, and that way we can kind of get further maybe than just 1 Corinthians. A lot of times when I've taught this course, sometimes I barely get into 2 Corinthians by the end of the semester. So we'll try to see if we can get into a little bit further. But let's deal with some background stuff. As far as the land and the city of Corinth. With the land of the city of Corinth, there are some things that are significant. And if it helps, I can cut all the lights off as long as you promise not to go to sleep. Would it help if I turned all the... Are you okay in seeing this? Either or. Okay. If you're okay, then I'll just leave it the way it is. A couple of things that makes the city of Corinth significant. First of all, it was an ideal setting for defense. As far as military speaking, it was an ideal setting for defense. And I'll show you some maps in just a moment. Its geography made it prosperous. It is on the water. There's a city set on the water, and it's just about near the water, I should say. And so therefore, with all kinds of ships coming in, it was very much not only prosperous, but also a center for trade and manufacturing. It was home to what's known as the Isthmian Games. The Isthmian Games, and I'll explain what that is in just a moment. very much like the Olympian Games, only a smaller scale just about, and worshiping different gods, Greek gods, with these Isthmian Games as well. And when we talk about religious pilgrims, we're not necessarily talking about Christian religious pilgrims at this point. We're talking about pagan religious pilgrims. How people would come and visit certain temples to various Greek gods.
You're good.
We good? Okay, Corinth is located on what is called an isthmus. An isthmus is a land bridge. Please note that term. There's Cenchrea. Yeah, there's Corinth. Corinth is here. And that's an isthmus. It's a geographical term called for a land bridge. And so you can see now you've got a lot of trade routes going through here when they would come from Miletus and other areas, and they would come up through here, and they would dock at the ports at Corinth, and they would have their trade, they would have their all kinds of stuff. It was very much a multicultural and diverse location. Corinth controlled two ports, Lycaeum and Cenchrea. Lycaeum and Cenchrea. And again, they would dock their ships, their boats, at one side of the port. They would dock it at Lycaeum. Sometimes they would drag the boats or have mechanisms to move the boats across the isthmus. I think there's actually a canal there now, which actually obviously makes it easier to move boats through the isthmus. But then they would set out on the other side of the land. And of course, while you're moving your boats, you're going to have all kinds of trade and goods and shops and everything else, because you're a sailor coming off the sea, right? So you're going to have all kinds of stuff for those folks. It's a little dark. The culture of the population had a large population, a lot more slaves than there were citizens, but there were estimated to be about 250,000 citizens. A lot of slaves, 400,000. The clientele of Corinth, the people that would stop by, obviously are sailors, travelers for business who had to come through this way, travelers for pleasure. I mean, these aren't your upstanding church people here that are going through these ports. And so therefore, when they dock at these ports, they're finding all kinds of secular fun while they're waiting for their boats to be moved, or while they're waiting to be set out to sea again. Again, the main prominent language is Greek. It was very much a multicultural group. Very much a multicultural group. Rome was a very diverse, multicultural place, but Corinth would have been as equally diverse and multicultural, again, because of its location on the sea, as location as a port, as a major port. When you deal with the Isthmian Games, again, very much like the Olympian Games, these games were originally created around 581 BC. Originally, one of the things that it was to establish was it was established by leading families to celebrate the return of a republic. Again, a government governed by the people. And so they use these games to celebrate that return. Another game, another reason, I should say, why these games were given was in honor of the Greek god Poseidon. Does anybody remember their Greek mythology? Poseidon is the god of...
The water.
Yeah, the sea, right. Yeah, the water, which would make sense since, again, it's a city on the water. It's a city based on the water. He had a temple, a sanctuary in Isthmia, somewhere around the time of the 700s. BC, that is. I skipped at the part where Corinth was previously controlled by a oligarchic government, or oligarchic government, run by a few powerful people, almost akin to a dictatorship. Dictatorship, of course, is run by one person mostly, but you have here a group of people, probably, once again, the wealthy, the powerful, the rich. Now, the thing about this republic, governed by the people, is that it didn't last very long. I mean, they used these games and they celebrated the whole republic, the power of the people, power by the people, power to the people. But it doesn't last very long. Oh, you can't see my Death Star. Anyway, yeah. Can you see it? Do you want me to go back? Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just trying to get to my Death Star. But it doesn't last. You have actually several wars that take place. And they would do the same thing in these Isthmian games that they would do at Olympic Games. Yeah, sometimes they would compete naked. Sometimes they would do just whatever, gladiator type stuff. So very much along those same lines. When you again, did you?
I think it's good.
You got it.
Thank
Yeah, the republic would not last. You have here the Greek wars. And I'm going to kind of paint a broad stroke because I don't want to dive into every element of the Greek wars. You had, first of all, the Persian Wars. This would have been the Greeks between Persia, 507 to 477 BC. Then you had the Peloponnesian Wars between 431 to 404 BC. And again, this is Greek versus these people. And then you come to a familiar time that is between the Testaments called the intertestamental period. You know, while we're all doing our Bible thing and learning about Malachi and all this other stuff around 400 or so, then after Malachi goes off the scene, you have the intertestamental period, roughly starting around 400, more specifically, at least for the purposes of this discussion, 350 to 150 BC, in which Greece is conquered by the Macedonians. And you have almost a new form of Greek culture that shows up after the Macedonians conquer the Greeks. Did you get it? Okay. And the two key players, no one can tell I'm a Star Wars fan, right? The two key players, they don't actually look like this, but they introduced the Hellenistic culture, more so the son did the father. The father's name was Philip II of Macedon. His idea was to join us or die. That really didn't go over very well. He didn't win too many people to his cause. And so Alexander the Great comes along and says, how can we unify the people? How can we bring them together so that they're all marching to the same beat, they're all singing to the same tune? How can we unify them together through the same language, through the same culture, to bring them all into one unified, mostly language, and then secondly, culture. You may want to note that they bring them together by language and culture. The language, of course, is Greek. Everyone began to speak what we call this Koine Greek. Koine Greek. It's Koine, Koine Greek. The culture is called Hellenism. Hellenism. And that's why we're talking about the Hellenistic culture. Right? I mean, we can all get along just about together because we all speak the same language. But if you spoke a different language and you spoke a different language and everybody in here spoke a different language, it's hard to bring them together. So therefore Greek became the universal language of the day. Hellenism became the universal culture of the day. Some of the features of Hellenism, and I could go into all that. I love the intertestamental period, and I could go into that and how it affected the Jews. But I don't want to get sidetracked because I really want to talk about how it affected Corinth and the Greek culture there at Corinth. But it's interesting because some of the same features that you see in Hellenism in the intertestamental period are some of the same things that are rolling around today in today's society. Let's look at some of them here. They were very much polytheistic. Polytheistic is what? Many gods, yes. Poly is many, theism means gods. Do we not see that just about today? I mean, you can have Christianity, but just don't be afraid to add Islam or Judaism or Buddhism or whatever onto that as well. Don't limit your gods. The more gods you had, they felt like the better off you were. So polytheistic. Greek gods had very much, there were so many Greek gods. There was the god of love and god of war and god of the sea and things like that.
Where did they get those from?
Invented them mostly. It was just in their culture. They invented many of them. I mean, we've got to have, we need good crops, so therefore let's invent somebody, to help us to claim that there is a God who comes over our crops, that kind of thing. We want good sailing ventures and things like that. So let's begin to worship and call him Poseidon and worship him. Paul deals a little bit with this in Romans chapter 1, right? They knew God, but yet they did not glorify him as God. Therefore, they worshiped the creature more than the creator. And so that's some of what's going on here with these Greek gods, or any gods that people invent, these idols that people invent. It's a way of trying to deal with the supernatural without really looking towards God as the one true God, as the one who is maker and creator and sustainer of all. Human-centered. Don't get the idea that there was any kind of loving relationship with these gods. There's nothing like we understand in Christianity. There was no kind of loving relationship. Basically, you did things so you didn't tick the gods off. You appeased them. I don't want my baby to die, so you did some kind of sacrifice at the temple. I want a good crop, so you did some kind, and you didn't tick them off because you felt like if your crops went bad, what have I done? Almost sounds like Christianity sometimes, doesn't it? What have I done to tick God off to take Zeus off or Apollos. We're having a lot of wars. What am I doing to tick off? I think Apollos was the god of war. I might be wrong there.
They didn't really have like a background. Like we had the Bible and things like that. They didn't have anything.
They had documents and stuff like that, but no, nothing like what we have.
Just say they were real.
Yeah. Nothing like. A lot of it was rumors and hearsay and passed down from again in an attempt to try to explain some maybe supernatural or even explain natural phenomena. I had a bad crop this year. That's not necessarily from the gods. That's just the fact that it's life. I had a bad crop this year. They wouldn't see it that way. So, yeah. Human-centered, again, no relationships, secularism, that kind of thing. Again, very much into athletics and games. I'll go ahead and keep on going here. Athletics and games, which leads to the beauty of the body. This is where we get the idea of the gymnasium from. Gymnos means naked, so therefore they would have these gymnasiums and they would compete in them. You wouldn't want to be the guy in that gym class, right? I mean, or the girl in that gym class, because you're in that, you're competing that way. And some, don't get me wrong, sometimes it was about sex, sometimes it wasn't. It was just that think about it. All the Greek statues that you see, that you've seen on television, or if I don't know, if some of you went to Greece, didn't you? Or did you go? I don't know. Did you ever go?
I wasn't here yet.
Okay, but you can look through book after book after book, and their artwork was either naked or half naked people in statues. I mean it was something about the beauty of the body that they admired, right? A big one was no moral absolutes. Let me see. Is there another one? Yeah. No more absolutes. They didn't have a set code like the Ten Commandments. And then tolerance. You do your thing as long as it doesn't infringe on me doing my thing. Now, can you look at this list and go, hey, we're experiencing a lot of that even today. I mean, history is repeating itself. Tolerance. We claim we're tolerant unless we say certain things that trigger an algorithm that get us kicked off of Facebook. At least that's what I've been told, anyway. Right? I mean, we're tolerant. We have free speech, and unless the powers that be decide to kick us off and things like that, that's the kind of tolerance that even they experience. That's the kind of tolerance. Real quickly, Paul's ministry in Corinth.
A question, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, the major language over there was Greek, but the Rome used that as a business base through shipment.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any major language? I'm thinking of the language of the Romans.
Right, you would have had Latin. Most people were, a lot of times they were bilingual, or sometimes multiple languages. Greek would have been the common trade language, learning language of that day. I mean, that was the major. But yeah, then you would have had, even Jesus spoke a version of Hebrew called Aramaic, so yeah, you would have had some of that as well. But most of the time, to conduct business or trade, you would have had to at least be bilingual. Whatever your native tongue was, plus learning Greek. And again, this was so powerful that the Greek culture is one of the major facilitating things that ushered in Christianity, because of the language and the culture. As somewhat bad as it was also useful in spreading the gospel, because of course Paul, ministered in these cities and used the language to his advantage. So yeah. Paul's ministry in Corinth. Paul is visiting Corinth about, we have this in Acts chapter 18. This is his second missionary journey, around 50 to 51 AD.
Did he visit there like the most?
No. I mean, he moved from place to place. You'll see where he spent a few years here, a few years there, but no, he didn't stay in any one place.
Was there like any certain place he spent most of his time? Like, I mean,
I think we have on record in Acts that he spent at least 3 years in Ephesus, which would have been long for the Apostle Paul. But I don't know that we have very many beyond that. I'd have to go back and look at Acts and see how long he stayed at certain places. But we do have where he, like I said, stayed 3 years in Ephesus. Of course, he is joined by Aquila and Priscilla. His business, his trade that he learned and was being a tent maker. And it was Paul's custom to preach first of all, and you'll see this in his writings, to the Jew first and then to the Greek. And so his custom was to preach first in the synagogue, which had some good effects and it had some negative effects for the Apostle Paul. He was either causing a revival or he was causing a riot, or he was doing both a lot of times. And in this case, he preached in the synagogue, and after preaching Christ, because again, there were Jewish people here in Corinth as well, and after preaching Christ in the synagogue, he was violently thrown out. But you gotta love a man, you gotta admire a man with determination, with tenacity, right? Because after he was thrown out of the Jewish synagogue, some believed, some followed him, but then after that, he begins to go right next door, right across the street, and he starts a church across from the Jewish synagogue. He goes next door to the house of Titius Justus. Titius Justus was probably a Roman citizen. And somehow the Greeks and the Romans were more receptive, obviously, to Paul's message than the Jews were, although a few Jews did. So he went next door, started a church. I mean, it's kind of like, visiting a Muslim temple or something like that and being kicked out for preaching Jesus, and then going next door to the Muslim temple and then starting a church saying, hey, we're gonna still preach Jesus, right? The Jews who had been converted, some of them joined Paul. One of them was Crispus, the ruler, the elder of the synagogue. And he left, obviously, the synagogue and began to go over to the house church. I really think that that's probably going to be the way of the church, honestly. I wonder about that. Anybody have any thoughts on that? These days, I mean, I love, church. I don't think church will ever be. I mean, unless the Lord ordains and changes it, I don't think church will ever be what it used to be. And my heart is saddened over that a little bit. But then again, I'm interested to see what the Lord is going to do with this new church movement, with what we have to. I'm not talking about the new church heretics out there. I'm talking about true Christians who are following Jesus Christ, who have to adapt to this post-pandemic world, and now this violently anti-Christian world. I wonder if that's not the way of it, that we're going to have to start having house churches again.
Who are the major followers of Paul when he began those house churches? Are they the Jews or the Gentiles? The major followers of Paul when he started?
Right, yes, they would be in house churches. And
who are the major followers? Are they the Jews or the...
Most of the Gentiles. Most of the Gentiles, yeah. And Paul deals with that so much in Romans as well. That they were mostly Gentiles. That would have been the major. You did, like for instance, this case, you would find a few Jews that would follow, that would actually believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and would come out of that and things like that. But mostly it's Gentiles. Mostly it's Gentiles.
To be like God's people, why did they reject Christ so hard?
Well, for one, so looking back on it, for one, so we could come in. But these are people that have constantly rejected God's ways from day one. I mean, from day one they have been rejecting God's ways. Read the book of Judges. The book of Judges is all about how they went a-whoring after other gods. It's just following after God has brought you through all of this. They still have wrestled with this idea of for some reason chasing after other gods. And then they'll blame God. Hey, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, and they forget about what He has done. That kind of thing. And it's no different from time to time than what we do. We do the same thing. But one of them would have been so that the Gentiles could come in, so that we who are Gentiles could come in to the kingdom. That's why they rejected Him. He didn't reject them. He set them aside. If I could word it that way, He set them aside so that we could come in. But Paul does say that the Israel will be saved. There will be some of Israel that will be saved.
Now, Messianic Jews believe in Christ.
Yes.
Are they far off of the?
They're not far off. They have some quirky ideas sometimes, but they're not far off. They believe in Jesus as the Messiah. They believe in Yeshua HaMashiach, that Jesus is the Messiah. But they do have some quirky ideas from time to time. They get hung up on sometimes the Passover feast and the Pentecost feast and things like that, which is okay to look at. It's fun to explore, but it's still not going to tell me when the Lord's coming back. The Lord's going to come back when He wants to come back. That kind of thing. Again, Gentile believers were baptized. Jewish believers, when they would come over. Paul is persecuted. There was a guy in the city by the name of Gallio. This is 51 AD. Is appointed by the Roman Senate as a new proconsul. In other words, he is basically a tribunal judge. And unbelieving Jews bring Paul before him, before Gallio. Paul is accused of preaching God in a way contrary to Roman law. Kind of like instead of Caesar is Lord, Jesus is Lord, that kind of thing. This plan actually fell apart, ironically. And Rome actually began to persecute the Jews instead of Paul. And one of their victims was the new ruler of the synagogue in the city of Corinth, and his name was Sosthenes. And we know by Scripture that Sosthenes would eventually believe in Jesus Christ, become a convert, and actually follow Paul a little bit as well, become a fellow worker with Paul. So Paul did face some challenges while at Corinth, while in the city. And when he leaves the city, he faces challenges in dealing with writing to them. He hears various reports from various people. What are your thoughts on the church today? I know I kind of threw it out there, but what are your thoughts on the church today? Where do you think we're going?
I think those are faithful and those are living sifted. Kind of because we're talking about that in English. Luther kind of said the same thing. He said that the church began shifted those that are faithful and true, and they're really trying to do what they're called to do and be faithful Christians. And then you see those that are just falling off as like that.
Yeah.
And
Man, COVID did that a lot, didn't it? I mean, I'm not talking about deaths. I'm talking about, hey, let's stay at home.
yeah,
And then when we were told to go, we could go back in, we still stayed at home.
I think it'll lead to a point where we'll be persecuted for our
Yeah.
faith, and then you'll see either your real Christians are going to stand up for Christ, and then that's kind of like she said, it's going to be sifted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, the people that were just going to church for a routine are going to be
Yeah.
fall to the wayside.
We keep hearing, I keep from time to time hearing about revival. Will there be a revival? Or if there is a revival, will it look like what we've used to looking like? I think that's my question. Is if there is a revival, I don't think it will look like what we've been seeing before. Yeah. Because honestly, has what we've been seeing before in the past really worked? I'm not saying that everything that we've done in the past has been bad, but sometimes, and especially recently, it felt like it was just going through the motions. Even in revival services, it was going through the motions. And I think it's time to get shaken up a little bit, Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Now, with you mentioned revival now. The experience since the COVID-19 started in the church, we started with Zooming. Eventually, we moved into hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
The hybrid is helping some people that weren't coming to church.
Right, yeah.
But now, the people that used to come, they are relapsing now.
Yeah.
They need to stay home. And,
Yeah.
I had to preach last week that weekly meeting. During the revival, I had to preach a strong sermon against those people.
Right.
Sunday I saw the result. They came.
Yeah.
So what does it?
You're right. Because I've seen that in our own church, the church that I attend. Oh, we're reaching so many people that are out here in Texas and in these different parts of the country. I said, but we're losing the people that are in our local area that we're supposed to be ministering to. And this, there's an argument for it.
And another thing is, what I think some pastors don't understand is, just what I know a little bit about technology, if you click on something for a second and go off, it's still going to mark that you viewed it.
Yeah.
Like you might not watch the whole sermon, but if you,
Right.
if Home Bible College comes up on my phone, I can click it and then go immediately off and not hear a word President Thompson says.
Right.
But yeah, I viewed it.
Yeah.
You see
Yeah,
what I mean?
exactly.
You might not, it might say there's people in Texas looking, but really, in the grand scheme of things, they might not be.
Right, yeah.
I hate to be Debbie Downer.
No, I agree. Okay, let's see. Real quickly, let's look at the historical context of the church. The historical context. In other words, where is Paul getting his information from? He's getting it from three sources, and then we'll stop there. He's getting his source, first of all, from the house of Chloe. You gotta love it when there's some good old-fashioned church people just willing to tell on everything. So the house of Chloe. And I made her sound bad, but maybe she's not bad. I don't know. Maybe her family's not bad. Maybe they're not tattletales. I don't know. But it sure does sound like church people that just love to talk, right? They're the ones who bring up the initial argument that you'll see in the first 3 or 4 chapters of 1 Corinthians, that there is discord in the church, that there is division in the church, that there is eris, contentions, wrangling, strife. By the way, anytime I transliterate a Greek word for you, like eris, please know that, because that'll show up in a test somewhere along the way.
So you want us to write the Greek word?
I want you to write the eris down, yes, because you'll see eris, and it's contentions, wrangling, or strife. They're the family that brought word to Paul said, Paul, there are these people, some of them are voting for you, some of them are voting for Peter, some of them are voting for Apollos, and some said they'll just stay with Jesus. We'll get into it. Then there are the Corinthians themselves, as the rest of other people in the church. They have various questions, like whether or not to have sex within the marriage. They have questions like food sacrificed to idols. They have questions about orderly worship and what to do with all those distracting tongue talkers.
Didn't you teach us in the Old Testament there was a group of people that lived over by was it by the Jordan that were like they didn't believe in like sexual like within the marriage and like they died off, but they like
I don't remember teaching that.
There was like a group of people.
There's an issue going on in 1 Corinthians where they're having a difficult time. They think it's more spiritual not to have sex even though they're married. But that may not be the same case. We'll get to that when we get to 1 Corinthians 7. It could be. We good? We're still... Okay.
Question, sir. The people within the Corinthian church, can we say the majority of them were learning? Or
their maturity, you mean?
Learning. I mean,
yeah.
Because I'm thinking before someone could approach Paul and tell him what is happening within the church,
Mm-hmm.
They must have a kind of knowledge of
We'll hit on that Wednesday. We'll talk about that Wednesday. But yeah, they weren't slackers. They were people who some of them had knowledge. Paul will actually praise them for their knowledge. But the idea was that even though they had the knowledge, they were very immature in their actions and things like that. They may have had the knowledge about certain things. Even like with spiritual gifts, they may have had certain knowledge about spirit, but they were immature in the way they were handling it. So yeah. One more thing, I think, and that's these three guys here, Stephanias, Fortunatus, and Achaicus. These were the guys who brought the letter to Paul. But we will touch on that very thing Wednesday, okay? They filled him in on what others didn't mention. So they told the rest of the story. Which is why Paul's letter to the Corinthians, at least 1 Corinthians, seems so... Romans is so well organized, well put together, beautifully put together. Corinthians, it seems like Paul is running from one house fire to another house fire to another house fire, trying to put them out. That's the thing about Corinthians. And part of that is because of the way the issues were brought to Paul. It's like he'd start one draft, and then somebody else is coming down the road with a new problem. Oh, well, I got to restart this. I'm not saying that's the way it was. I'm just saying that's the way it almost sounds like him writing it, okay?
Why did he deal so much with the Church of Corinth?
He founded it. He started it. So therefore he has an obligation to it. Yeah.